Morning, Chris. How you doing this morning?
Hi, Ron. Doing great. How about yourself?
Great. It's going to be a great day. Had my caffeine. I'm all awake.
Same.
Real quick,
There
I'm
you
going to do
go.
a quick summary. If you're just joining us, this is part two of the online pharmacy series. Part one, if you missed it, we covered what is the online pharmacy and the platform. We talked about the different tiers of HIPAA for them. We talked about submissions of the prescriptions, and then we covered the patient or buyer dashboard. Today, we're going to cover and move on to now the provider dashboard and signing and digital signature and editing and doing the prescriptions and the telehealth sessions and the back office integration and all the fun stuff. So today's going to be a little more technical than part one. And I'd go ahead and I want to start off by turning over to you this time. Normally I start these off, but I'm going to turn over to you and I want you to explain what is a provider dashboard and who are all the different entities that could be quote unquote providers in these online pharmacies, right? Kind of give us the lay of the land of what the heck is the provider dashboard and how do these pharmacy backends work?
Absolutely. Well, yeah, that's a really interesting sort of area to focus is how, in general, the question I would say would be how can we automate steps that can tend to be either time consuming or a bottleneck. So they may not take a lot of time, but they might end up blocking a process from occurring that we can either automate or make it very easy for the required parties, not just the patient, but in this case, the actual provider, to be able to sort of check all the boxes on a particular step. Now, some of the steps when a provider is either going through the process of reviewing a prescription. In many cases, there will be a process where there's a scheduling and setup of a telehealth or some kind of a appointment to determine that a prescription should be written. Then the actual event will need to occur and documentation of that interaction, whether it's in person or virtually, as well as possibly signatures on documents. So e-sign, a lot of times there might be chat. So it's possible that there could be a need for an extension or an adjustment to a prescription or, renewing a prescription, et cetera. And so these are all things that a provider might need to get involved in. And of course, noting when the prescription is ready, these kind of things. So the provider dashboard is really sort of an interface where we can, when done properly, we can get information really integrated into this secure HIPAA compliant dashboard where the provider has access to based on their authentication and then their authorization. So authentication meaning they've validated and proven that they should be able to log in. Authorization meaning that they, based on who they are and their role, they should have access to these patients' records or these interactions with this PHI essentially. Then these providers get access to this HIPAA compliant dashboard where they can complete steps very rapidly. And all of the processes that might otherwise require manual steps, discussions, physical changes, etc., can be done digitally and can be done in an automated way. And this would include not just the providers interacting with the patients and setting up like telehealth calls, doing e-signature digitally, being able to send prescriptions off to a pharmacy application, but it can also include other custom steps. So a lot of our clients have really specific steps. You may have labs that need to be sent out. So sometimes, there needs to be a blood draw or a blood test before a prescription can be issued. There may need to be some other sort of step that has to happen depending on what type of prescription it is. There may have to be a physical in person that occurs. And so without going too much more into the weeds, the point is there's a lot, that a provider may need to do, right? And I think this is a really key thing because if you're building a dashboard for a provider, they're busy and they're typically really, constantly being inundated with work. And so it's really critical that it automate everything where possible, that it do so in a HIPAA secure way, and that it really truly is removing overhead from those providers wherever possible, because they are so busy. So you've got to make it intuitive. And so whether you work with a company like Clarity or someone similar, these are things that we encourage you to be looking for. Is there a native sort of intelligence that you're getting around this reality of needing to make it a seamless process for the providers while having all of the muscle of the ability to do all of these integrations, with the telehealth, the e-signature, the labs, and the pharmacies, and other integrations like that, right? So you kind of have to marry both of those things together.
Yeah, it's true. So one of the things that we've seen is this kind of paradigm shift since COVID hit on the functionality of these integrations that we've been doing forever. And it used to be that, we would be tying these individual entities together and just sharing data, and nobody really overlapped, if you will. But now we've got this telehealth becoming really pervasive, right? And so now the process on even the pharmacies that we design and build have completely changed just in the last few years. So for example, some of the things that we do now, and it really is around this provider dashboard, right? The integrations haven't changed. The patients coming on and ordering medications hasn't changed, but the way they order and what we do with those orders and how those orders turn into prescriptions has changed drastically. Because it used to be such that they would physically have to go to the doctor, they would get a prescription, and then maybe they could go online and buy it or order it and then upload the prescription. Now people are going and buying and making requests for drugs long before they get the prescription, right? And that's changed drastically. And so now things, and I'm just going to go over one of the scenarios here, and I might even bring it up on the screen and show a couple screenshots here. But let's say, for example, one of the ones that we're designing for a company right now, they sell and manufacture a lot of the drugs themselves and sell the drugs. And then they don't have the doctors to give the prescriptions though. So then what they've done is they've opened up and invited this provider network to join their team. And then all of these providers get access to the back end. And so all of these quote unquote leads, if you will, these patients come to the site. So Ron goes to the site and I go to the men's health. And I think I'm a little beyond help with male pattern baldness, right? So we'll go with erectile dysfunction for males, right? So I go in and I order 900 Viagra. And now, as soon as I pick that drug, one of the things that has to happen is the doctor may or may not want to go ahead and approve that if it's a simple prescription without a telehealth or without an appointment. But the only way that he or she would do that is if they had some medical information about me. So one of the things that we've done for this client is we've got a database, and I don't remember if it's 200 or 300 different questions, but then we have a tokenized map. I don't know what else to call it, a tokenized list of questions per drug. So if Ron went in and picked the hair drug, like for Rogaine, it would ask me obviously questions about male pattern baldness and my health and things like that, blood pressure, especially for that one, right? And then for erectile dysfunction, it might ask, height and weight, and a whole bunch of other things that may not be important for male pattern baldness, but certainly for sexual activity would be completely different, right? So one of the things we do differently is when I go in and order the Viagra, it pops up a medical questionnaire that is very specific to that drug. And then that questionnaire is kind of like my triage or my initial appointment with the doctor. So it goes with that order. And then when it gets assigned to a provider, when the provider logs in, they see these requests that are pending. They open up that request and see patient name Ron. Ron is ordering 900 Viagra, goes to the medical questionnaire, sees all the information, and then the doctor can take some simple actions. He can say, based on the questionnaire, approved, or based on the questionnaire, no way, or based on the questionnaire, I can see that he's young enough to be sexually active, but instead of 900 Viagra, I'm going to edit that and give him 3 Cialis. Or I want to request a consultation. And then it sends that request back to Ron. Ron gets the request. And then as Chris kind of mentioned there, one of the things, and I'll pop up a quick screenshot here, Ron can have the option to have a text chat with the doctor, can have a voice call with the doctor, or maybe the doctor wants to require a telehealth session. And so all of those different types of appointments can then be made. And then the provider can go in, and whether or not they require a digital signature, we've got that with some of our clients, some don't require it. Then the doctor has to go in and actually approve, finish, do whatever for the prescription. Then the prescription through the integration gets forwarded to the pharmacy. The pharmacy fulfills. The status of that prescription comes back so that Ron can see what the status and who his doctor is now and how many refills he has. I mean, there's so much that goes into this, right? So I think we've covered the provider dashboard pretty well. Obviously covers all the ability for those providers to look up their patients, get assigned, view the questionnaires if they're prescriptions, edit the prescriptions, make prescriptions, write the prescriptions, digitally sign prescriptions if need be, deny prescriptions, and when they get refill requests, go in and refill those too. Meanwhile, all of that has to be done, and Chris alluded to it with the role and scope. So only the people that should get access to that PHI information when they log in can get access to the patient data and make edits to those prescriptions. Anything else you wanted to add on to the provider side before we move on to the integration with the back office apps?
I would say in general, the biggest thing is that, this is sort of something that you'll see as a commonality within a lot of our discussions that we have with potential clients or even existing clients, is to say, ideally look at where you're going to be going over the next 3 to 5 years and where a lot of your competitors are. And then also sort of like proximate or similar industries that might be more advanced with their automation and self-service capabilities. And ideally project that forward and build out phases or priorities with milestones that you think are achievable, that are going to be the highest payoff with the, ideally the least scope. And this is a great way to work with a company like Clarity, is to sort of go in with this plan so that you can attack some of these different aspects and build them out successfully, one after another. And that kind of mindset of taking chunks of this, getting it executed into production, working on the next chunk, that's really successful for a lot of our clients. So it's not just like the full capability, but it's also how it gets executed is also a really key part of the project as well. But yeah, I think that is a great coverage of all of the sort of key areas to consider functionality and process-wise as well.
Yeah. Another thing that I'd like to say, based on what Chris said, that prioritized roadmap of those features that he's talking about should align with what you want it to do for the business. Because so many times I see people put someone in charge of this project that treat it as a standalone, and they're not really aware of the bigger picture. It's like, hey, we want to grow our revenue by 20% this year. What does this need to do to help grow that? How does this generate leads? How does this generate more business? How do we get more patients? How does it drive traffic? How is it going to help support us in achieving those company goals? So make sure that you're thinking not only tactically on the features, because that's what I see a lot of people do. They get tactically into crawl, walk, run. What are the features? Let's prioritize the features and then let's do them. And they completely forget about, as you said, the roadmap and the milestones that can help drive the business. And that's the last part of today's webinar that we're going to talk about. We're literally going to talk about the digital marketing and the monetization of the platform. So real quickly, let's go ahead and dive into the integration now. So these integrations can be many, and we've done over 4,000 integrations in the 17 years we've been in business. So this is literally, besides e-commerce and HIPAA, our bread and butter, right? I mean, it is a first-class citizen is integration. When we talk about integration of an online pharmacy, what could that be? Well, there could be many things, right? One, it could be a simple e-scribe. So a doctor that is not in our provider network sends a prescription and they want to forward that digitally to us, the pharmacy. Okay, well, then we have to have maybe an e-scribe integration or some integration to a third-party prescription tool. So when those doctors electronically submit those prescriptions, they come in and we get those, right? So there's an integration. Another integration might be with an EMR, or it might be with insurance. So when a patient comes in, we need to check their insurance and see what their copay should be for the medication. So there's Medicaid, Medicare, others. We've done this for another client, we might be integrated with the FDA. So when Ron goes in and has his back surgery and they come in and prescribe me Oxy, and I'm making stuff up again, but they prescribe me Oxy, we can go out to the FDA, look up Ron's other prescriptions and says, oh, he's already on naproxen for his knee surgeries. We can't mix those two medications, right? We want to be able to be aware of those conflicts and anything that might be a danger. So we might be to other medical databases so that we can compare and maybe even just get information from a government website, an approved FDA website for information about the medications. We might want to be connected, and we've done a bunch of these, to the labs. So when people order a COVID antigen test and it gets sent in and purchased through the pharmacy and the kit gets sent to Chris, Chris comes in, registers the kit online. And when he sends the kit in, it goes to the pharmacy, and then the pharmacy wants to produce those results. Those results automatically through that integration come posted back to the pharmacy, to the portal, automatically notifies Chris that his results are ready. He can log into the HIPAA compliant portal and see his lab results. I mean, there are so many different integrations, integrating with the different hospitals, with the clinics, because sometimes the pharmacies are within the hospital. So when a doctor sees a patient in the hospital and they prescribe a medication and then tell, I'm in the hospital, Chris comes to see me and Chris needs to pick up my script, then the doc can say, hey, I called in this script for Ron. He needs to take it 3 times a week, drop downstairs into the pharmacy and pick it up before you leave. That integration sends it from the EMR down to the pharmacy software downstairs. And so when Chris walks downstairs, prescription's ready for pickup, right? Do you want to add anything about integration, whether it's technical or whether it's business wise, where we talk about these integrations and how strategic and tactical they are? They're both, right? I mean, this really is the meat and potatoes to basically automating almost everything, right?
Yeah, it really is. And I would say, I will just kind of give a couple of thoughts here that are sort of tactical when approaching the integration side of things. Usually it really helps to, when you're sort of setting out to do an integration, to be able to identify what the ideal process is. In other words, if you're going to automate something, do it manually first and sort of see what the natural steps are that need to be completed, and do it manually with a series of different scenarios that would sort of exercise the boundaries of what that integration would need to account for or be able to handle. Then once you've essentially established boundaries and you've gotten a manual process in place, it's a lot easier to then articulate and sort of decompose, if you will, or break down those set of manual steps into steps that can be automated. So a lot of times there's a process of identifying what can't be automated within reason. I always struggle as a technical mind with the idea of something not being possible. So there's always a way to do anything. It's just maybe
does not compute with Chris.
Yeah, maybe it's like it's not reasonable within the other priorities given the amount of resources it would consume, right?
Right.
And so ultimately, like from a business perspective, answering those questions is foundational. Without a solid foundation of those answers, you're sort of tending to use more resources doing things that might be building on a shaky foundation with your project. The other thing that I would say that tends to be really, really helpful is being in a position where your production environment, I shouldn't even say it tends to be really, really helpful. It should almost be like a requirement in your thought process typically. But depending on where your business is, this may not be a luxury if you were to say it that way with the scale that the business is at. But a lot of clients, as they grow and they scale, they have a clone or a test environment for the systems that they're going to be integrating to make sure that when the integration testing and development and validation is happening, it's not going to impact their actual production environment. Now, this is probably like really obvious in general, but it's not necessarily practical depending on the situation. So there are ways to work through this where you can set up explicit test records. If you can't create a different environment, you can make a naming convention for test records. You can have test companies or test sort of areas of the data set And just in general, this idea of prepping properly for the testing for the integration can be a really big thing too. So I know I'm sort of talking about like preparatory steps, but one of the things that I love about the integration side of things is it, depending on where you are at with your scale of your business, this can be a complete game changer. I mean, it can literally change the profit margins and the customer sat almost overnight, so that your business can operate, at a massive scale without having to linearly increase the cost of your human resources, your payroll. And this is what, foundationally is the promise of technology, right? But in order to get there, you ideally really need to take the steps to plan it out and think about the logistics of executing on it. A lot of software integration projects can be challenging, and those are some of the foundational reasons why. If you don't do that planning and if you don't have this sort of setup so that things will tend to go well, then it can be really high friction and can cause failure in projects.
Yeah, I agree. So that kind of covers the provider dashboard and the integration. So the last couple of things we want to talk about, we'll just briefly cover the ongoing HIPAA compliance. And then the last part we'll cover is the marketing, right? The digital marketing and monetization of the platform. So as far as the ongoing compliance, Chris did a really great video on our channel. If you just go to our channel and search for accountable, there's a really great video that he did. So we're an Accountable HQ partner. That's one of the tools that we use. There's multiple tools out there, but that's one of our favorite. Part of the reason why is because they do a third-party audit. It's a really well-organized dashboard that shows you the functionality. And finally, they actually give you that. There really is no HIPAA certification process anywhere, right? There really is no governing body that does that. But if you follow all these rules, you do their audit, they actually give you a seal that shows that you're HIPAA compliant that you can post on your website. And it's a great seal. I'll post a screenshot of it here so you can kind of see. But if I remember, I'll try to throw the URL to that video in the description below as well and put that as additional research. But it's a great video. It's about 10 minutes. Chris does a really good job. He walks through the tool. But Accountable HQ is one of those tools that makes it really easy for you to have a third party that audits your site for you. The dashboard walks you through all the things necessary to make sure you have a compliance officer defined. You're doing your HIPAA training, all those things that you just forget about, that you don't know about. That's all in there. And it just walks you through setting that all up. It's relatively inexpensive. And they do the third party audit every month and provide a report for anything that needs to be done that either you can do, or if it's technical in nature, you can pass off to a partner like Clarity, and then we can go in and fix those items. And that will help your organization stay HIPAA compliant. And again, Chris and I on our HIPAA channel have done, I can't even count the number of videos we've done where we talk about compliance and how the OCR goes in and assesses fines and things like that. They don't have a finite list because the list of HIPAA compliance doesn't apply to everybody in the exact same way. So the most important thing that they want to see more than anything else is the effort that you're making, and you're making reasonable efforts to follow the compliancy guidelines. And this is one of those things that if you're doing makes a huge difference to illustrate that you are doing everything you can to maintain your HIPAA compliance. You have anything you want to add about ongoing HIPAA compliance, Chris, before we move into the marketing?
Yeah, I think you did a great job of hitting the key points there. And I would say that this is something where a lot of clients will lose sleep at night. And certainly it's a challenge because there are some vague areas of it. But it is well worth the time to invest in, number one, sort of operating at the industry best practice or slightly above at minimum. That's what I would say to what you just said, Ron, really doing your best, to meet certain standards. The other thing is there are some excellent tools to conduct audits and self audits of your process. And a lot of times it can be a little bit overwhelming at first to sort of think about adding extra steps and processes, but it is helpful to just sort of boil it down to what the whole purpose is of all of this security and HIPAA compliance. And it's basically, these patients are trusting their sensitive data and the security of that data to your organization. and being able to preserve that and keep that, private, is certainly a really big deal to them. And it would probably be to all of us for our information and our loved ones. And so the steps that are set out there as standards, again, there are some powerful resources to literally walk you through and help you complete audits, periodically. They really will make a huge difference with sort of reducing your footprint of security risk. And it's not just security, it's also, the actual privacy part of it, with your internal controls, who has access to what, and more. So I really just strongly recommend, in summary, using auditing tools and really engaging in the process of going through a periodic review and being diligent and continuing to meet or exceed industry best practices. And then, like you said, Ron, at least at night, you will know that you're doing everything you can and you can rest well. And then also, generally, you will be in a good position because you're going to be exceeding the standards that are necessary for HIPAA compliance, right? So It's kind of a win-win. But it can be overwhelming, and I would just encourage folks to get started on the process, get into the process. You will be surprised how quickly you will ramp up and meet those standards over time. So.
Yeah, that's true. Especially if you consult with someone like a Clarity who's done hundreds and hundreds of these HIPAA sites that can help give you some guidance and just point you in the right direction. Because a lot of time it's that analysis paralysis of, I don't even know where to start. I don't know how to get into it. I don't even know where to look, And It's really easy for a consultant like us to go, oh, here's our 12-step program. Just start here, boop, and just point you right in the right direction, and off you go. You just start walking forward, and the next thing you know, you're on the path.
That's right.
So I love that. When talking about marketing your website, I like to talk about it in two different ways, because a lot of times people get one way right, but then they forget the other way. So I like to talk about both the SEO and the CRO. And for every hour of SEO, I do an hour of CRO. What is SEO and CRO? Obviously, everybody I think has at least heard of SEO, right? Search engine optimization. And that's basically creating the content for the crawlers so that when somebody goes out on Google and does a search, we show up, right? That's what the SEO is. I like to talk about that as like going out and putting flyers. You and I are in college and we're going to throw a big frat party at the frat house, right? And I'm responsible to go out on all social media and put all the flyers up, in the cafeteria and get as many people to the party to make it a huge party, right? And Chris is responsible for the CRO. That's the conversion rate optimization. Chris is responsible when they show up at the house that they have a good time and that they go back and tell everybody how good the time was, right? So if either of us fail, the entire thing falls apart. If I bring 10,000 people to a party and Chris hasn't thought about parking, bathrooms, he only has 1 6-pack and a pizza and no music, the party's a mess. Conversely, if I bring 3 people home and Chris has 7 kegs, 100 pizzas, and he got Oingo Boingo to come play, 3 people are going to have a great party, but it was a waste of money and we failed miserably, right? So there has to be a match of driving traffic to the website. And then when that traffic comes to the website, you have to service them. You have to make sure they can find what they're looking for and convert. What is convert? Well, what does your website do? And what do you want them to do when you come to the site? Those are your conversions. So you have to set goals. You have to set funnels that guide them to do that. You have to figure out what the strategies are to drive traffic to the site. This could have a whole number of different things. It could be a lot of SEO. It could be a lot of forms tuning and having the right kind of forms. There could be AI and machine learning that helps the personalization of the website. It might be turning on abandoned cart notifications. I mean, if you finally got somebody there and they put something in the cart and then they got distracted and got busy, you want to make sure to remind them so they come back, right? It might mean that you might have to do some UI, some UX customizations. And then to do those customizations and where you spend the money and how do you make changes? A/B testing. Sometimes we call it multivariate testing. You might want to test different messages, different forms, different fields. There are different tools. There's tools like MouseClick and Hotjar, and there's a whole bunch of them. What do those do? Well, some of them measure where people click on the website. Some of them measure, like I got 142 people to the sign up page, but only 3 people filled out the form. Which field did they drop out on? When they got down to the phone field, everybody thought they were going to get spam phone calls and they dropped out. Okay, so I rethink, do I really need their phone number in order to reach out to them? Well, I'd love to have it, but for right now, I just need their email. So let's just take that field off and test and see how well the form converts. Boom, out of the 143 people, now 70 people fill it out. Huge improvement, right? So those are the kind of things for me when I think about marketing on the website. And I haven't done the monetization. I haven't done about the ads and the promotions and stuff too. But is there anything that you want to add to what I said, or even take it into those other additional areas, Chris, when it comes to marketing and managing that?
I think in general, there are a lot of areas where folks sort of aren't sure how they can incorporate marketing data that they have about their, patients or potential patients into that marketing. And that's something that I would also encourage you to not only get legal counsel about, but also work with a team like Clarity that can tell you what, our experience has been with companies that have spent, literally millions and millions of dollars analyzing what is and isn't okay. And even though we're not legal counsel and we're not going to give you the legal advice, we can at least tell you what we've seen from other clients in similar spaces. And that's really powerful because I think there's a lot of gray area there with marketing. And you do have to be careful about that with HIPAA. So that's just sort of a sliver of the marketing. But yeah, I think it's so important that you still be able to take advantage of all of the power of marketing that you were talking about. And if you don't, you're going to be doing a disservice to your customers, and they're going to basically not get the same benefits that they're already accustomed to with other platforms, maybe not in a HIPAA space. And they're just going to require that same level once they become accustomed to it. They're going to require it in the HIPAA space. So if you don't provide it, your competitor will. So it's really, really important,
Right.
just to your point, Ron, that our potential customers and our customers actually really engage fully to deliver the complete value that their customers are looking for, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And I think one of the things that Chris always, he jokes around and always talks about database and always talks about the data, right? He's the data king, but there's a reason they call it business intelligence, and business intelligence is making smart business decisions based off data. And so how do we do that in an online pharmacy? Well, analytics and tracking what the people are doing, right? You've got different ways to do that. One can be the negative, one can be the positive. The negative could be out of the 10,000 people that visited my website this month, not a single person went to the Rogaine page, and I make a big profit on selling Rogaine. So the negative gives me information about not having any traffic to that. So now I might go run some Google ads. I might put a special on Rogaine on the homepage. I might do some more SEO blog posts about Rogaine and male pattern baldness because there's a huge market out there for it, right? So knowing the negative things that are occurring on my site can help let me as a business owner know that I might need to do some additional promotions, some additional work to help bone that area up and capitalize on those areas. The other way is the positive, right? Out of the 10,000 people that came to the website, more than half of them went to my pages that dealt with type 2 diabetes. It's so prevalent nowadays. Great. Well, then I'm going to take the drugs and the treatments and the wellness and the Atkins bars and all the stuff that I have that I sell that have to do with type 2 diabetes, and I'm going to make it prevalent on the homepage. I'm going to go in and put a whole section about got type 2 diabetes. We've got complete treatments. Learn more here. We help you with blah, 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 right? And I might want to exploit that because such a large portion of my audience is interested in that and deals with that, and I can capitalize and help service them better, right? So data is the king, and knowing data and having those analytics and tracking those analytics are going to help you make great business decisions. The last thing I want to touch on for just a couple minutes is the monetization of the platform, right? So you've gone in, you've spent a bunch of money, you put the platform together. Now you want to make money. Obviously, we're an online pharmacy, so we're going to sell our medications and we're going to do what the pharmacy does and make our money as a pharmacy. But I also have the ability to monetize the platform by selling ad space, right? And this happens on a lot of our different sites. We've got B2B sites that have vendors that want to sell on the marketplace. We had a job posting site we just built for a company that was similar to Indeed.com. And so there were companies that wanted their logo and they wanted to sell their ads. And so they bought ad placements. And so they're posting their ads and their companies on the homepage of the job site, right? You've got other companies like, Johnson & Johnson and Pfizer that may want to market on your homepage, and other providers. Maybe you've got doctors in your area that are taking on new patients and serve a special area, and they want to provide and they want to hang a shingle on your storefront. And so you can say, hey, aside from type 2 diabetes, if you're looking for a doctor local here in Austin, Texas, that can help with your diabetes, come visit Dr. Ron. Right. And so I, as a doctor for type 2 diabetes, could then go market on your website. I mean, there's a number of different ways that you can monetize and market and make money on the website. Aside from the pharmacy, and I'm changing gears a little bit here, this happens a lot on auction sites that we do, right? I place my auction on there, but I also want my auction on the homepage. I want my auction in the featured auctions. I want my auction rotating on the homepage banner. I want it in one of the sidebars. So when people go into certain types of auctions, my auctions also show up as alternate auctions. I want the auction house, and this really can't happen in pharmacies, but with the auctions, we do it quite often, where I want the auction house to, once I post my auction, I'm going to spend a couple extra $100 and have them send an email blast out to everybody notifying them that I've done that. So that's the gray part when it comes into marketing on the pharmacy that most of our clients get in trouble, is they want to go in and potentially, a doctor comes and says, hey, I've got a new drug for type 2 diabetes. Can you give me a list of all your patients who have type 2? I want to email them about my medication. You can't do that because that patient has not given permission for the pharmacy to share that PHI data with that pharmacological company to send information to them about the new drug, even if it would be helpful. That violates HIPAA. And we've seen quite a bit of penalties assessed by the OCR, the Office of Civil Rights, because doctors and dentists, the last one I read was a dentist who shared some information to a marketing company about all their patients who had problems with whatever it was, all their patients who had crown. I don't remember what the exact thing was, but somebody wanted to market something to people who had a specific condition. The dentist said, oh yeah, well, here's all the people who've had crowns, go ahead and market to them. And they did. And that violates HIPAA. They can't do that, right? You can't share any medical information about anybody without permission. So the marketing aspect has to be very vague and it has to be very general, and you have to not violate HIPAA when you do that. You can even violate HIPAA within your own organization by, let's say I'm in marketing and I have nothing to do with prescriptions. I have no rights to go into the software and know who has what condition because I'm not the pharmacist. I'm not a pharma tech. So I can't go in and see medications for patients. But yet I work at CVS. And so now CVS carries a new drug and we want to go out and market that drug. And so I, in marketing, now that we carry that drug, go to the pharmacist and say, hey, can you just give me a list of all the people that have type 2 diabetes so that I can, or all the people that take metformin because we have a new Synjardy for type 2 diabetes. We want to go email everybody out and give them a coupon. I can't do that because I have no rights in marketing to know about any of the conditions of any of the people that buy medications from my company. Even though I'm part of that company, I don't have a right to do that. So that's part of that, who gets the appropriate access to the PHI data and who can have access. Matter of fact, Chris and I, when we went, we like to review the HHS Gov website. We look at all the breaches. We look at all the reports and things like that. And for the last 5 years running, the top 5 penalties that were assessed, or maybe it wasn't the top 5 penalties, but the top 5 reasons penalties were assessed were all around granting access within your own organization to people that weren't supposed to have access to that data. And that's a big one. So anyway, that kind of concludes today's pharmacy conversation. Again, that concludes part 2 of our online pharmacy series. Chris and I will continue to do these series. We'd love to hear from you in the comments and find out if there's any additional things that you'd like us to cover, any additional topics, especially within HIPAA. We've got a ton of stuff in our HIPAA channel. We're constantly here. We want to hear from you. We'd love you to go to the website, clarity-ventures.com, reach out to us, schedule a free HIPAA consultation, or jump on a call with me. I'll walk you through a lot of different scenarios and talk about how we've solved these kind of problems and rolled out hundreds of these projects for other clients, and see if there's any way we can help you. Chris, you want to close us out?
Oh, I think that was great. I will look forward to hopefully hearing from some of the folks that watch, and look forward to seeing you in the next videos. Thanks for watching, and thanks, Ron, and bye for now.
Thanks, Chris. Bye for now.